Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. And in this fourth video, as we continue our exploration of the topic of managerial ethics, we look at the topic, as you can see from this title slide, of trust. Trust and how that relates to your managerial choices and your managerial conduct. And so we hope that after this video, you will be able to, one, discuss why trust is so valuable in organizations today, to provide descriptions and working definitions of trust that would be useful not only to your own understanding, but to the understanding of those you manage and lead, to identify why trust is, quite frankly, a very complex and difficult topic to discuss, to examine, as I call it, the genome or the components of trust, and then to finally identify some specific tools and practices that you as a manager can use to build and establish and restore trust with your employees. So let me first offer to you this graph. As you can see here, the data that we've collected over the years for the question, the percentage of people who believe that most people can be trusted. And of course, you can see the downward trend from 1987 pretty much steadily down to 2006. It's a little bit of a peak in 1998, but the downward trend is obvious. Next, let me show you some more data. The percentage of people with a great deal of confidence in Congress. Now you look at this and you can see obviously here the downward trend, a little peak there right around 1983, 1984. Other than that, the trend from 1966 down to the 2000s is pretty obvious. Let's keep going. The percentage of people with a great deal of confidence in business, and you can see here from 1966 down to 2011, well, you can see very easily what the downward trend is as well. Now, I think if I show you those four pieces of data, you can reach your own conclusions about where we stand as a society, as a culture, in terms of trusting the large institutions, including our very own society, with which we have to do. In fact, I can make the statement with some pretty clear data behind it that if you are age 60 or younger, you have never worked a single day in your life where trust has not been declining here in the United States. I think it's a fair statement to say that we live in a time, perhaps the lowest degree of trust ever in the United States. It has only been declining since the 60s. Trust in all of our durable institutions. And therefore, I think you find it no surprise then if I frame the discussion this way. If the rarest commodity in business today is trust, if I can point you in the direction of a better understanding of how trust works, I may actually be giving you access to the most precious commodity on earth, even more valuable than this very large picture of a diamond that's here on this particular slide. That is how rare and therefore how valuable trust is as a commodity, as a tool, as a practice for managers today. So, as we consider this, what is trust? Well, here are some working descriptions. I'm not sure if they're purely definitions, but certainly they are working definitions or descriptions that will help us to better understand this very topic we're talking about. This comes from a variety of different authors. First of all, trust is proposed to be the willingness to make yourself vulnerable to loss at the hands of another. I think it's a really good, useful description there. Second, trust is the confident reliance upon another when there is uncertainty and you are exposed to vulnerability or risk. You can see it's similar to the first description, but a little bit different there, right? Third, you see there, choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. I think that's a really great definition because it includes, right, the whole fact that we are deciding, we are choosing to trust someone, choosing to make something that's important to us vulnerable to the actions of someone else. And then the fourth bullet point, trust makes cooperation possible, cooperation in groups, and it drives performance, productivity, growth, happiness, well-being in societies, cultures, nations, and of course, in organizations and firms like the ones that we will work in and we will manage. Trust is that important a commodity. And in business, in organizations, we can certainly cite this. Some of us have been fortunate enough to work in companies where corporate culture had very high degrees of trust. People trusted one another. And then we've also had sometimes the misfortune of working in organizations or with managers who did not trust us, where trust was low. And one of the things we can point out here is if you have the misfortune of working in a culture where there is very low trust, where people don't trust each other, well, what does that look like? What does that feel like? Sometimes it feels like, well, your boss is always micromanaging you, doesn't trust you to do your job, is always double checking your work after you finish it, all those kinds of things. And so what we can say is those kinds of actions of distrust will decrease the amount of speed that anything happens at that organization. And if speed goes down, what happens to cost? Well, you see it with the red arrow there, right? Wherever speed goes down, cost goes up. But for those of us who have had the opportunity to work in high trust cultures, then you can see there isn't that type of micromanagement. People are just free to do their own thing. And as a result, speed increases. And any time that speed in an organization increases, commensurate cost drops. And so I don't think it's too far of a stretch to reach the conclusion that, well, quite frankly, if you work in a culture with very low trust, your organization has higher cost. In fact, your organization could be said to be paying trust taxes, which if you took the time, you could actually measure how much money you're wasting simply because your culture does not have trust. But the flip side is also true. If you work in an organization where trust is high, then you're saving money in all sorts of places. As a result, your organization is actually collecting trust dividends in terms of cost savings, speed, as well as, you see the last bullet point, not just financial, but what about increased levels of safety, increased levels of collaboration, taking more risk, realizing more joy, having more creativity and innovation. In fact, this is really the discussion that we're entering into. All of the commensurate benefits of increasing trust in an organization. So, why is trust so very, very difficult to talk about? One of the reasons why trust is so very, very difficult to talk about is because it is not a singular defined kind of a term. When I say the word trust, we think of many different types of things. And so let me just ask you these 4 questions you see here on the screen now. Think of a name that would go with each one of these questions. If I tell you, in my crystal ball, I can tell that you will be incapacitated for 8 weeks. Or quite frankly, maybe you're just going to go on vacation, but you're not going to be at work for 8 weeks. Who do you trust to lead your work team? I want you to come up with a name of someone that you would trust to lead your work team for 8 weeks, for 2 months. And then the second question, I want you to also come up with a name. That question, who do you trust to hold both your ATM card and the 4-digit PIN code to access your ATM card? That's another name. Here's the third name. Who do you trust to drive your 4-year-old child to a doctor's appointment and back, and to ask the right questions and remember the doctor's answers? And then finally, the fourth question, I want you to put a name to each one of these questions. Your primary care doctor says you need open heart surgery on Monday. Who do you trust to perform the operation? Now let me at least offer you this. As you think of those 4 questions and you come up with 4 names, I'm willing to bet that unless your mom is an open heart surgeon, you got at least 2 to 3 different names in this, right? Some of you may be looking at that second question, who do I trust with my ATM card and the PIN code? And you're willing to say, well, of course, that's my spouse. While others of you in this very same class are saying, that's the last person I'd trust with my ATM card and the PIN code, right? Each one of these questions, you may have 4 different names in your mind as you answer these questions. And why is that? Well, it's because trust is a difficult topic to talk about. It's not just singular. Trust in some contexts is based upon character and integrity, right? That's really what you're basing that answer. Who do you trust with your ATM card, right? Whereas in other settings, trust is not really about integrity, it's about competency. And that's why, in answer to the fourth question, you're willing to trust a complete stranger, you don't even know their name, to open you up and do heart surgery on you, right? I mean, in that last case, let's be honest, we don't really care if that surgeon is cheating on his taxes, cheating on his wife, as long as he has long history, experience, and competency performing tricky, complex open heart surgery. We don't want to have dinner with that guy or that gal. We just want them to be able to perform the surgery successfully, right? And that's one of the reasons why trust is such a difficult topic to discuss. It means different things in different contexts. And so I would tell you that, at least in one way of understanding trust, trust is a complicated matrix of both character and competence. On the character side, we consider that person's integrity as well as their intent for me when I'm thinking, is this someone with sufficient character for me to trust what they say and what they promise? Whereas on the competency side, I'm trusting not only their capabilities, but also what's their track record of proven results. That's more on the heart surgeon side, isn't it? Whereas with the ATM, or to trust someone with my child, that's more on the character side. But let's be honest, with each one of those questions, it's kind of a combination of both sides of this diagram, isn't it? If we're honest, both character and competence. And quite frankly, this is one of the reasons why, as managers, when we are making decisions based on trust, we have to be very clear. What are we basing our choices on? Is it primarily character? Is it primarily competence? And if it's a mixture, to what degree is it a mixture? Well, there are also additionally more nuanced ways for us to understand and dissect trust. And that's where we come up with this slide, what I call the genome of trust. How do individuals actually make the decision whether to trust someone or not? Well, there are at least 10 different aspects of what people use to make this decision whether to trust or not. The first three I've separated out, and that really has to do more with the history and the background of the person making the decision. To what degree does this person have a tolerance for risk? What is their basic level of psychological adjustment? What do I mean by psychological adjustment? Well, you understand that there are some people who have been burned so many times by others, they just simply find it difficult to trust anyone. And that's the level, the propensity simply to trust that we're talking about based on psychological adjustment. And then there is, of course, power differential. When someone has a very high degree of power in the relationship, they will be more inclined to trust someone. Why? Because they have the power to fix things if things go wrong. Hope that makes sense. But really, the bottom 7 issues are the issues we're really talking about having some influence over when we talk about someone's decision to trust. We can influence these kinds of things. For instance, what is the degree of situational security that someone has in a particular setting? What are the degree of personal similarities you share with the person that you're thinking of trusting? And of course, the obvious implication here is that if I perceive that I have more in common with a person, I'm frankly more quick to trust them, and if someone than if someone is very, very different than me. This works hand in hand with the next bullet point. To what degree do I believe this person has shared interests with me? Do we have the kinds of things that we are interested in together? It goes hand in hand with personal similarities. And then perhaps one of the largest issues here, do I believe this person has benevolent concern for my interests? Does she care about me? Does he care about me? Does this person care that I achieve my goals and reach my objectives? Now, on the competence side, of course, there is my perception of their capability to actually deliver on their promises. Do they have the experience and the resources to actually deliver on their promises? And then what is their track record of predictability or integrity? What's their track record? Are they always someone who I know keeps their promises? Or quite frankly, do they have a pretty spotty record? They promise stuff, but they don't really follow through that often. And then the real ace in the hole, the last bullet point. Trust is very much based upon your level of communication with the other person. Are you someone who over communicates, or do I keep my cards so close to my chest that the other person is left to try to figure out on their own and play secret agent? What is he really thinking? What's she really thinking? What's their intent? Or do I communicate those kinds of things? Well, as you consider this genome of trust, the elements, the factors that really contribute to someone deciding to trust you or not, we would offer you some practical tools, some practical mechanisms that as managers you can consider using with others. One of the quickest ways to establish trust with someone, to treat others with warmth, to be relaxed and to be natural in the way that you communicate and deal with them. That helps to put people at ease, and the level of personal warmth communicates benevolent concern. You will have to, as a manager, work extra hard to build bridges with people, especially those who are naturally more introverted or shy. It's still your job to build bridges with them, not for them to come to you. As I've said several times in this class, clear is kind. It's your responsibility as a manager to over-communicate, to make sure that you're understood, which means taking pains to be specific in your demands, in your requirements, in your requests, to repeat yourself and repeat yourself and repeat what you're asking until you're absolutely sure that you are clear. And it's your responsibility, as we say, to stick in the dipstick, to check in with people and make sure, hey, what was your understanding of what I told you? I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Tell me again, repeat to me what I'm asking of you to do. You got to stick in the dipstick to make sure people really, truly do understand exactly what you are requesting. On the behavior side, make sure that you understand every commitment's a promise, and therefore keep your promises, both large and small. It means something to the people you manage if you say, I will be there at 12:15 and you show up at 12:14. Every single time you make a time commitment, you're there a minute early. That means something to people. Not only the small things, but of course the big ones, right? If you promise, you do this and I will secure you a compensation bonus, you gotta follow through on every promise that you make to your people. And as we've mentioned before, one of the keys to establishing trust with the people around you, the people you manage, is to be the kind of person that puts the priorities and the goals and the objectives of others first. If you're the type of manager who others know, you are constantly thinking about what is a win for them, helping them to accomplish their win, their success, their objective, their goals, that will automatically build trust with those you need to manage. Now, I try to keep these video lectures relatively short so you can bite these things off in bite-sized chunks. But I hope that you have been able to understand from this short lecture, why is it that trust is so valuable today, that you have at least some descriptions or a working definition of trust in your mind, that you can identify why trust is a complex and very, very difficult topic to discuss, that you have examined the genome, the components of trust, and understood a little better how it is these can work in your favor as a manager, and you've been able to identify at least a couple specific tools and practices that you can use to build trust. I have to tell you, this is a crucial topic in business today. It's one of the primary topics that I touch upon in my consulting and executive coaching business. This is indeed, for my money, the most valuable commodity in business in the United States today. We've not said everything we could say about trust. There are times where I will talk for 2 days full of workshops on the topic of trust, just to help managers and leaders and executives improve their game, how they manage people. But at least this is an introduction to the topic for you as we talk about this series on ethics and corporate social responsibility. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope it whets your appetite to look at this topic even more throughout your career. And we'll see you in the next video.